This isn't just a piece of legislation that can be repealed. We are hardwiring this into the vein of the Australian Constitution.
What they're talking about now is not co-governance. What they're talking now is separatism. It's two totally separate groups, and it doesn't benefit Māori. We're treating them like they're second class, they can't achieve. It's just wrong. It's the subliminal message you're giving them that they can't. Most Māori don't agree with that. What needs to happen is we need to look at where there was blatant robbery and theft, because that did happen. But as a nation, what's our vision going forward? Do we want to be a divided and separated nation? You see the harm that these idiots, I shouldn't say that, no they are, these people, they're either idiots or they're evil.
You're spending more than ever on education.
They're teaching blatant lies.
And education just going down the gurgler. You've got these books coming out that are being shown in schools. My shadow is purple.
This is actually help our children.
Granddad's Pride Parade. Who wants to know about
What are the long-term outcomes from this?
I'm so confused.
And that discussion hasn't taken place. That's the real issue. Where's the discussion, the debate?
I don't know. Sounds like Nazi propaganda to me, a distraction.
The distraction is real, but it's also part of Marxist philosophy is you destroy the family. The family is the strength of a country. We see that. And as the family unit becomes less and less effective in society, you need more and more laws and more government. When the family structure breaks down, those young people are more likely to get involved in crime. That's just the statistics say that. New Zealand has not got a good government. It has not got a good electoral process. It has not got a good government structure. All of that is simply the environment that we're creating in New Zealand with legislation that can change really quickly. Only 5 million, yet we've got this huge central government system and then all the local governments right throughout New Zealand. We're just spending too much on bureaucracy. That is why New Zealand is suffering a huge cost of living crisis. We're losing our assets. The future's not looking good. Crime's going through the roof. Our education is plummeting and we're struggling with our healthcare. Vote for someone that you think has got a vision for a better New Zealand.
So a week ago, we saw a situation where Prime Minister Anthony Albanese of Australia announced the voice referendum, the Aboriginal voice to the Parliament vote would be on the 14th of October. Funnily enough, New Zealand has an election once every 3 years, and their election is on the exact same day, the 14th of October this year. It's quite a fascinating situation we have in New Zealand because they've already had a voice-like situation, the Waitangi Tribunal, which we'll get into in this conversation. So naturally, I came to New Zealand looking for answers. I've stumbled across the Leighton Baker Party, and I'm sitting here with Leighton Baker himself, and I'm looking for answers. Leighton, welcome to the show. My name is Joel Jammal from Turning Point Australia. So when I shook your hand, I was like, good, firm grip. Construction hands, right?
Yeah.
What is it about people in construction? They just happen to be the people that stood up against government tyranny, government overreach, and the breach of our freedoms.
Most people in construction are basically, they're problem solvers and they're practical. So they're looking, okay, what is the problem? What is the cause of the problem? How do I fix the problem? I've got to deal with the cause. So you apply that to every part of your life. So I think a lot of people in construction look at what's happened in New Zealand and go, hold on a minute. So for me, I got involved in politics more than a decade ago, and it was all along, hold on, I thought we had a democracy. I thought democracy meant we chose, but it's not that way at all. The government are telling us what we're going to get. And I was going, hold on, that doesn't sound like a democracy. And people say, oh, well, you don't really understand democracy. Well, maybe I don't. But I thought it was the people having authority, but it's not. In New Zealand, we've lost it. It's gone.
Yeah. Well, look, I figured there's not much alternative media in New Zealand.
No.
And I had the unfortunate viewing of seeing your interview with Sean Plunkett on the platform, which is supposedly a big channel in New Zealand, and that's fine. I didn't think that you got a fair hearing. I actually thought it was one of the rudest interviews I'd seen in a long time. I'd love to interview you and hear what your plan is to get New Zealand back on track. But also, I'd love to pick your brain on the voice to Australia, you guys call co-governance with the Maori tribes here, and what the similarities are there and what it's done. Firstly, I wanted to go to the voice. You've got a phenomenal candidate running with you, Dr. Wendy.
Yep.
And she's someone that is very well read on this topic. But you guys have had a voice-like committee called the Waitangi Tribunal since 1975. Can you fill my audience in on that? How far-reaching were the powers of this organisation? And what is it?
It affects every part of New Zealand's life to some degree. But the problem with that whole thing is it's separatism. So people talk co-governance. It's not co-governance. We actually have co-governance. Co-governance is when you work together to solve a problem. To me, that's co-governance. So we have that in New Zealand. So we have Māori in Parliament and local government. They're not excluded from anywhere. And so that, to me, is co-governance. It's working together. Bob the Builder, working together to get the job done. But what they're talking about now is not co-governance. What they're talking now is separatism. It's two totally separate groups walking alongside, not necessarily in the same direction either, but side by side. And to me, that is destroying the nation because, you know, on the building site, you work side by side with people. It doesn't matter their ethnicity or gender. No one cares. And it's the same in sports club and everything else. We actually just get along. Why this division now? Why the separatism? Because it's definitely not co-governance. It is a separatism thing. And it doesn't benefit Māori. Because from 1975 up till now, most Māori haven't benefited from the Waitangi Tribunal. The elites get a lot of money, and there's some uber-rich people there with a lot of influence. But look at the stats for Māori in New Zealand. They're terrible. So you got to say, 47 years of the Waitangi Tribunal, the statistics for Māori are still terrible. So what have they done and what have they achieved?
Yeah.
On the basis of that, nothing. And so do you carry on down that track? Definition of insanity? No, it doesn't work. It hasn't worked. So why would you go there?
I've been here for about 2 days.
Yeah.
And I've already been getting frustrated with the idea that they're changing a lot of the names. Even the Department of Health has a Maori name. People have complained about they're taking their heavily pregnant wife in labour to the hospital and they can't read any of the signs, trying to find the hospital. How far-reaching are the powers of this Waitangi Tribunal and this co-governance industry? You mentioned once to me it has control over water, even land rights. How far-reaching is it?
Well, it's never ending, but you've got to understand, when I started off, we've lost democracy. Once you've lost democracy, you've lost everything. You have no right of control. And the government will just keep demanding, decrying things on you. So the whole overtake of language, whether you like it or not, there's never any open discussion about it. It's just, this is what we're doing. And we don't care what you think, we're doing it. It's the waters thing, the three waters, that's actually a bit of a red herring, I believe, personally. All it's going to do is massively indebt New Zealand. It'll give those elite groups a huge amount of money because they can borrow whatever they want on the taxpayer. The taxpayer is the guarantor for it. They can borrow what they want and use it in all their management. Like we spent $1 billion, $1,000 million just setting up the bureaucracies for that without fixing any pipes.
Wow.
That is obscene. It's not just disgusting, it's obscene, and that'll just get worse. But really what it does is sets up for privatisation of our water, which, I mean, we've already done with our electricity, our telecommunications, and it's just another asset that New Zealand will lose. You can see it obvious as, because they'll borrow massive amounts of money, we won't be able to repay it, the people we borrow it off will claim that asset.
I was shocked to learn on Monday, you guys have had Maori-only electorates since the 1800s. And they were never abolished. They were always kept there. In the last election, there were 6 electorates. Now it's expanding to 7 electorates. And you can be, if you're Maori, you can choose to be on the New Zealand electoral or vote in the Maori roll. And it's just a completely alien concept that whoever runs in this seat must be Maori. What is your thoughts on that? Because that blew my socks off.
They were set up for good reason. So there's a lot of things that happen for good reason, but that time has come and gone. Right. Māori are well represented in New Zealand politics, on all the major parties. All the parties have Māori representation. So you don't need the Māori seats anymore. They're a thing of the past, but they're kept there because Māori want them there because it gives them more say and more power. So that's why they're there. They're a convenient tool for some to use. Yeah,
and I bring that up because I think a lot of Australians, they are worried about Aboriginal Australians having 2 votes, having a 2-class sort of system. The voice referendum vote that we have, and the voice happens to be the most popular thing Anthony Albanese is serving for dinner. I call it his favourite sandwich, which is lettuce, chicken, and Thomas Mayo, who wrote this book. And Thomas, one of the architects of the voice referendum and one of the main pushers, he's a blatant communist. And it just seems to me the communists will do whatever they want, whatever they can, and whatever is necessary to seize power. Is that what's happened to New Zealand?
Absolutely. It's a Marxist system, isn't it? And if you can't see that, you're obviously not looking, because what that does is it disempowers the general population for a few to have extra power. Like Animal Farm, all animals are equal, some animals are more equal than others, pigs are the most equal. And it's that played out in real life, and we see that here in New Zealand. There's a state wanting to control everything, and then the individual and families lose their freedom, but they're also destroying families at the same time, which is a stupid way to go. unless you've got an agenda of wanting to control everything, which seems to be what it is.
Before we hopped on camera, you asked me, Joel, what are you even voting on in Australia? What is the actual vote for the referendum for Australia on the voice? Well, on a referendum day, this is what Australians will be asked. A proposed law to alter the constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve this proposed alteration? And your bedazzlement, your visual bedazzlement was hilarious because you're just like, what's the detail? I wish I could tell you, but there's nothing. No. There's no legislation pinned to it. There's no clarification on, what is the voice? How many people are going to sit on it? Is it like a high court? Can they stop us from going to war? Are they going to have control over the land titles? Are they going to have control over the sky and the fish in the sea? I wish I could tell you. It's a bit of a blank check.
When I heard it, I was like, what the heck? What happens is once they get that, so if you voted for the voice, yeah, we want that, then anything they do later, they'll be, oh, you voted for it. This is what you voted for.
Yeah.
When you go, well, you never told us. No, this is what you voted for. And that's the bizarre thing. It just reminded me of our previous Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, and they were talking about the hate speech, and they asked, well, what is hate speech? And she goes, you know it when you hear it. I was like, are you kidding me? I mean, it is so ambiguous that it's incredibly poor law. That's what it is. And that referendum is just incredibly weak and poor and manipulative. It's someone trying to wedge the door open so that they can bring a whole lot more in. That, to me, is fundamentally what we're seeing in New Zealand the whole time, is a government, they're not being open and honest to what they're trying to achieve. They just bring a little bit more and a little bit more. Whereas if they were open and honest and transparent, it would be, hey, look, this is our vision for the future. This is what we want it to look like. Is that what you would like? And allow the people to choose. But there is none of that whatsoever. It is all subterfuge, behind the scenes, deceitful, and you're facing the same thing there. Be open and honest. What do you actually want by achieving this? What is your end goal? Tell us what you want so that you, the Australians, can actually vote, okay, yeah, cool, we're happy with that, or not. But when you do it by subterfuge, it's just wrong. It's disgusting.
And this is what's disgusting, because I'm sure you'd agree, most New Zealanders, most Australians, they're quite well-meaning people.
Yeah.
And these political psychos, I call them, are taking advantage of people's goodwill to close the gap with Aboriginals or close the gap with the Maori so that education could be better, so that living standards can be better, life expectancy. It just seems to me that they're doing the classic charity thing where there's no incentive to actually solve the problem, because then the gravy train just stops. And I'm really concerned about that, because this isn't just a piece of legislation that can be repealed. We are hardwiring this into the vein of the Australian Constitution. This is a blatant power grab. Once it's in there, once we agree in concept this can be done, the voice will be informed by the Parliament of the day. Today it's Labor and the Greens. They can give the voice whatever power it wants, and they can override the entire Constitution because it's a new chapter in the Constitution. The only winners out of this are the lawyers, Canberra. Even Aboriginals themselves don't want it. Are you finding that there are these race hustlers that sort of make millions, tens of millions of dollars? I mean, in Australia's case, we had a situation where Noel Pearson, prominent voice activist and promoter, his organisations received something like $550 million since 2005. And what has he achieved? Nothing. In fact, Aboriginal organisations, they receive something like $40 billion every year from Australian taxpayers. Is this something you guys are seeing in New Zealand as well? Or?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I've said previously to Waitangi Tribunal, all the money that has gone out, what has it actually achieved? So the bottom line, are Māori a lot better off now than they were in 1975 or not? Are they achieving better? Are they living longer? What's the expectancy? I don't see a whole lot of data that says they're a whole lot better off. In which case, you've got to stop and back up the bus and go, okay, then is treating people separately or saying they're not worthy or able to do the same as other people, is that actually a winning strategy, or are we shooting ourselves in the foot? And to me, part of the problem is you're almost benignly saying that these people aren't able to achieve, which is total falsehood. The thing about the Māori, they're probably some of the bravest, most ferocious people you could meet. And by brave, I mean, if you look at the history, like young Māori chiefs jumped on a boat, loaded with white sailors, sailed across the world to a place they'd never been to before to meet a king to petition for their people. That takes guts. That is brave. That's the sort of people they are, and yet we're treating them like they're second class. They can't achieve. They need to hand up. It's just wrong, and it's the subliminal message you're giving them that they can't. Whereas most Māori don't agree with that. They know they can achieve. They know they can do it. What needs to happen is we need to look at where there was blatant robbery and theft, because that did happen, and abuse. Like, New Zealand had some appalling laws in the day to rob Māori of land. Like, that's historical, that happened. But it's got to be the whole picture. That happened, we deal with that as a justice issue. But as a nation, what's our vision going forward? Do we want to be a divided and separated nation, or do we want to be a nation that's on the world stage providing a great place for people of all ethnicities, all races to come and live and bring up their children? I would say the second is what we really want, and the first will not do any good for Māori or non-Māori. It'll be divisive for all. And when you divide a nation, you simply allow someone else to take it over. So I've been saying to people, it's a bit like we're arguing over where we're planting lettuces and cabbages, but at the same time, all our land's been sold offshore anyway, and we won't have a choice soon. And that is what I see happening with the race card being played.
Right. So your message to Australians on the 14th of October?
Ask your government to be super clear. What are they actually wanting? What are they proposing here? Don't be ambiguous. If you're genuine and you're clear, be really, really clear what you're trying to do. Because if you're simply setting up a gravy train for some elites to be able to milk the system for generation after generation, you're actually making really poor decisions. It should be really easy to understand, it should be super easy to implement, and it should achieve its desired goal. That's what I'd say to Australians. Is this good law? And from what you just read out to me, you've got to be dreaming. It's nowhere near it.
It's no detail. Yeah, you're right. If you don't know, vote no. That's what I'm telling my audience.
Yeah.
But I was pleased to see that they'd already arrived at that conclusion, because they could smell a rat after COVID very well. Moving on economics, I had a couple Uber drivers say that, things have gotten too expensive in New Zealand, and we're moving to Sydney. I have cousins in Sydney. And I was shocked, because I think things are expensive in Sydney. How can you free up the economy? What are you promising the New Zealand people?
What New Zealand's done, it's got this ideology that's going, we can't use any of our resources, so we're importing resources from offshore. So we have to pay for them offshore, then we have to pay to ship them here. But we say, because we're not getting ours, that makes us green, which is a blatant lie, another lie. It's not making us green, because some of the resources, we don't even know how well they're getting them out of the ground if they're using good systems. So we're saying, if we're going to use resources, use New Zealand's. Use our coal, use our gas, use our oil, because then it generates income for us as New Zealanders. It keeps more money here, and it helps us pay off our debt. And then using the resources for us people too. So understanding and valuing people, we're not doing that much as a nation. So what's happening is the government is bringing out more and more regulation to control people all the time, but then you don't see them flourish and reach their full potential. They feel hemmed in and controlled the whole time. So once you allow people to flourish, then you actually get better value out of them, and society gets more out of them, because their skill set they bring to the fore rather than being controlled. So whether that's in teaching or nursing or farmers, it's a similar sort of pattern across the board. More and more legislation, more and more control, less and less freedom, and then you don't get the best out of people. So if we're going to set New Zealand free, one, we've got to reduce the size of central government. We've got a massive central government that spends billions of dollars a year and achieves very, very little. Re-empower communities to make their own choices, particularly in regards to their water. Let them choose. The whole Three Waters thing, instead of setting up 10 extra bureaucracies with 10 other ones underneath them that'll milk money out of the system, just allow the councils to borrow the money off a government fund at the minimal interest rate to fix their water. That would be the cheapest option, and that would avoid a whole lot of waste. So New Zealand is probably the land of waste, really. We waste resources, we waste our people, we waste a massive amount of money and bureaucracy. We're only 5 million, right? You've got cities with more people, yet we've got this huge central government system, and then all the local governments right throughout New Zealand. We're just spending too much on bureaucracy and not enough on frontline services.
When I hear these guys saying they're going to move, everyone they know are talking about moving after this election. A lot of them saying Australia, and I'm like, well, that's great, but New Zealand, there's no reason. You have everything you need to be a great country.
We do.
It's
Absolutely.
just, you're missing just leadership and good management, which is basically getting out of the way. It's such a sad thing to look at that, because one of the Uber drivers even said to me, 1 million people will move out of New Zealand after the election.
I don't know if there'll be 1 million, but it is huge. It's young people moving to try something different, which has always been the case in New Zealand. Yeah, we're a small island down the bottom of the world, and people want to go and travel and look around the world, and I've got no problem with that. but it's people trying to expand the opportunities, people looking to the future for their families and going, what future have we actually got here? And part of that is in relation to this co-governance. Do we want to live in a divided nation where we're second-class citizens in our own country? The government's got to be very careful that it doesn't breed an environment where people have lost hope that they can actually be a good member of society in their own country.
Yeah. No, absolutely. One of the other aspects where you're paying extraordinarily high taxes. Obviously, there was a lot of handouts during COVID, which these drivers were complaining about while they were hard immigrant workers. I don't know what your government was handing out, $400 a week or something.
Here's 500. It's amazing that around the world it was similar. We went to Austria last year and they were doing the same thing.
But then to see what they're delivering, they're coming up with diddly squat, nothing with regards to the Maori issues. We're seeing worsening conditions. Nothing on housing, despite the promises that
100,000 houses. Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah.
What happened? And on top of that, you're spending more than ever on education, and education's just going down the gurgler. Now, I don't know if this has been something that has been coming up in New Zealand, but these are some things that Australia has been very upset about. A lot of parents, a lot of single mothers have been talking about. You've got these books coming out that are being shown in schools, in libraries. Here you go. You've got The Queer Chameleon. You've got Queer and Queer. We're coming for your children. That's not what it says, but it's here and queer. You've got the pronoun book, how to speak to people with pronouns. Got the Muslim girl at the bottom there, making it. They want to make it look diverse. You've got My Shadow is Purple. I know for certainty, I know 100% this was shown in a school to kindergarteners in Australia. And on top of that, you've got Granddad's Pride Parade. Like, who wants to know about their dads being gay and all of that? I mean, I'm so confused. Is this the sort of thing you're seeing in New Zealand? Is this a big problem? Please.
That's exactly what we're seeing in New Zealand. Again, where was openness and honesty about it? So you would think that if the government wants to bring in some literature like this for children, they'd send a memo back to home, to the schools will be able to send it back to the parents and say, this is what we're looking at teaching in schools, are you happy with it? But there is none of that. It's all by subterfuge. It's a control mechanism. And people are not stopping and thinking, actually, does this help our child? Does this actually help our children? What are the long-term outcomes from this? And that discussion hasn't taken place. That's the real issue. Where's the discussion, the debate in it? Where's the opportunity for people to say, actually, not that interested in that? Because all this is an ideology, right? This is someone's belief system. And that's okay. I've got a belief system, you've got a belief system, they've got a belief system. But theirs is being forced and introduced to every school right throughout New Zealand. How is that fair? How is that right and just that a minority's belief system is put onto everyone and yet other belief systems aren't?
Yeah.
That's what's wrong with it. It's indoctrination by stealth. And by a government that promised to be open and transparent, you've got to be dreaming.
Do you think, you mentioned some of these topics, you could see them as red herrings. Now, I came across this great resource from Family First. They're sort of like a third-party campaigner. In Australia, Family First is a party, whereas in New Zealand, they're more of a, information about your candidates that are running. And they had the intelligence to go around and ask, what is a woman, to all of the party leaders? Now, obviously, you're a common sense statesman. You said an adult female human. That's what a woman is. Some party leaders, like Rawiri, refused to comment, basically. And others, like Hipkins, he just completely lost the plot. He doesn't even know what a woman is. He didn't have a pre-formulated response.
That was a funny snippet we all got to see. Sean Plunkett asked him, what is a woman? You go, tricky question. I wasn't prepared for it. Really? You want to be the leader of the country? That's when most people in New Zealand have got to take 2 steps back and go, hold on, what is going on here? We know men do not give birth, never have. For them to say it, it is the emperor's new clothes 1,000 times worse. And what is so bad in New Zealand is people go, oh, if it doesn't affect me, I don't care. As long as I go fishing and hunting and watch my rugby, I'm not really too worried. They can do that over there. But now it is encroaching on their families and in their schools, and they're teaching blatant lies. So you may have heard that New Zealand new curriculum came out and they dropped the sciences, biology, chemistry and physics. Well, they obviously dropped biology a long time ago because they're telling blatant lies now to kids. So there's biology gone, physics is gone, and chemistry, they want CO2 as a poison. Well, man, without CO2, we have no life.
Literally.
And so, I believe they've done away with the sciences a long time ago, and now they're just telling us that we're not allowed to believe them. Don't read yourself. Science, our government says we are the sole source of truth. Well, that's totally unscientific. The science is settled. That's totally unscientific.
Yeah.
They're actually setting themselves as the demigods that can tell you everything and you must obey. And you're just the plebs to obey the dictates of your master. That's what we're seeing in New Zealand. And it's across the board on so many different things. You're not allowed to debate and discuss. And if you do, you just, propaganda and the use of it has been in use for centuries. That's what people do. The Germans obviously were really, really good at it. And just you demonise a group, make them less than human, you can treat them differently. So, it happened in the slave days, well before World War II. That's how you treated slaves. They're not human beings, they're slaves. They're whatever name you want to call them, you can treat them differently. And it's exactly what we have happen now. If you disagree with the government, you're an anti-something or they won't. There's no engagement in open discussion or debate over it. It is simply we'll demonise you and we'll treat you differently.
Yeah, literally. Like, I've seen people calling you a white nationalist, and I'm just like, what? For trying to find out where the tax dollars are going for these co-governance programs? I don't think Leighton would be sitting with me right now in an interview if he was a racist. To what extent do you think this is a distraction from perhaps some of the big issues? Because I can't help but feel that if you went back in time and said to Winston Churchill that one of the policy debates in an election was, what is a woman? I think he'd be like, I don't know, sounds like Nazi propaganda to me, a distraction.
Yeah.
Like, who really runs New Zealand? What is exactly going on with this distraction?
Yeah, so the distraction is real, but it's also part of Marxist philosophy is you destroy the family. The family is the strength of a country. You destroy the family, you destroy the strength of a country. And so we see that. And as the family unit becomes less and less effective in society, you need more and more laws and more government control. But at the same time, there's international groups that want to take more control over countries. So at the moment, the WHO have changed their charter and they've gone from becoming an advisory group to being able to set rules and then enforce them. You've got the pandemic treaty, which they want to control what happens in another pandemic. Well, it's not their role to tell us in New Zealand what to do in a pandemic, but our government looks, they could possibly sign up to that. Well, you've just given control and decision-making to outside forces. Since about the 1980s, we've been selling off our assets as quick as we can, and for no real gain. We haven't gained anything. Things haven't come down in price, but we've lost the assets.
Yeah.
Whether it's our forestry, whether it's our power generation, whether it's our telecommunications, the water looks like the next hit list that they've got. And as a nation then, you start losing control and losing the ability to generate income. We've done it also with the whole climate issue with these carbon credits, where we're actually paying international organisations to come to New Zealand and buy our land because they're buying the land to plant pine trees and they're getting the carbon credits. So we're not doing it for the pine trees, just the carbon credits. And so it's viable for them to come and do it, which means the farmers can't afford to buy the land because they can't get it to work economically at the price that they're having to pay to compete with carbon credits. So in effect, New Zealand is paying offshore companies to buy our land. That is so stupid. Other countries, you can't buy land, but in New Zealand, we're paying them to buy our land. That's how dumb we are.
So a lot of these companies, they buy carbon credits, which is, to maintain certain bits of land or even rejuvenate bits of land so that they can basically destroy another part of the world?
Well, they could do that, or you could buy the land, plant the pine trees and sell the carbon credits to Air New Zealand to offset its carbon from flying planes or, the big business. So you're not actually saving the environment. This is the stupid thing about it. The whole thing is you're not saving the environment because you're saying, I can pollute as much as I want as long as I pay this guy money. So I'm paying him money so I can keep polluting. But it doesn't change anything in the environment. And the amount of CO2 that we produce in New Zealand, or carbon, that they want to tax, it's nothing compared to the cruise missiles we see going between Russia and Ukraine at the moment, or what happens in a volcano in Peru. It is tiny and minute, and yet we're destroying our economy and selling our land for it. It is actually really, really stupid governance. If you try and debate it, you're a climate denier or something, rather than, well, let's actually talk about it. What would happen if we doubled the CO2 in the environment? Would it actually make it warmer? And there's really good science that says no, but you're not allowed to debate it. So we had an example earlier, National MP Maureen Pugh simply asked for some evidence to validate what the government were doing. And she was saying she had to go and be re-educated. So I don't know if she got sent to northern China to be with the Uyghurs or not, but that's where it is in New Zealand. You must not ask questions. Do not try and get informed. Do not do your own research. Sit in front of TV and we, the government, will tell you all that you need to know, or all that we want you to know, and you will be obedient. And that's the society we're living in.
Yeah, get back in line sort of thing.
Yep.
I mean, China purchased Fonterra.
No, they didn't purchase Fonterra.
What happened there?
No, Fonterra is so the majority of dairy farmers in New Zealand belong to a cooperative. The cooperative is called Fonterra.
Right.
So China never purchased Fonterra, but China has come to New Zealand and have bought dairy farms. They've built their own milk processing plants. They've got their own transport or things. We've sent our herds over to China, sold them herds. So we've given away the genetic information that we've bred over years and years. We've just given it to them. When Fonterra went to China, they lost $1 billion. China came here and they've got the whole lot. So China are very smart. You know, you can have a go at them, but at the end of the day, they've got a whole food chain and we lost $1 billion. You can't say we're the smart ones.
Wow. It sounds like New Zealand last policy, because I've been pretty concerned and I've seen the similarities between how cosy some members of the National Party are in this country and the Labour Party with the Chinese connections, even to the point that the Five Eyes countries, you know, Canada, Australia, the USA and the UK are like, is it the Four Eyes now? Is it even the Three Eyes now? Yeah. Because Canada's also a little bit shaky and a bit close with China. These are concerning things, and we're coming to an inflection point with the rising superpower, China and America.
Well, BRICS. The BRICS is what people don't understand. We've had superpowers generally last 100, 150 years. The states are starting to fall off their superpower status, because if the BRICS countries, which are growing and growing, and I think they control like 70 or 80% of the oil now, as soon as they're strip trading in anything but the US dollar for oil, then the US, because of its huge debt, I think it's really going to struggle. And so I guess maybe New Zealand's been geopolitically smart in aligning itself with what could be one of the new superpowers. For me personally, I don't agree with, simply because I don't agree with the human rights abuses. But then I see what's happening in New Zealand now and thinking, well, maybe that's more alignment than I actually realised.
Right.
You know, in China, you're not allowed to question the government. You try doing it here. In China, you've got accepted belief systems and unaccepted ones. It is exactly the same here. So we are moving a lot more into that socialist Marxist sort of state here in New Zealand. But most New Zealanders don't get it. They still blindly think that they're in this free society. I know if you ever played that game where you get a bowl of flour, pat it flour in the bowl, flip it upside down, take the bowl off and put a lolly on top, and you got to cut it with a knife. Never played that game? And if the lolly falls, then you've got to put your hands behind your back and get the lolly out with your mouth. But as you cut the flour, you can imagine it fall away and the lolly becomes on a sweet tower. Well, that's what's happening. You know, we're losing our freedoms, we're losing our land. Financially, we're getting less and less. We're selling off our assets left, right and centre. And we're getting smaller and smaller economy for that reason per person. At some stage, people have got to wake up and realise, have we already lost too much, or have we still got the opportunity to come back from this? That's the challenge.
I've noticed on the topic of crime, a lot of people have been complaining and saying it seems as though it's just been going up. I mean, what does the Leighton Baker party have in terms of policies on that to perhaps change policy on that?
That's where the whole causation comes in. So a lot of the government thing is reactionary. We'll build more prisons. We'll do this. But, well, what is the cause of crime? What are the common denominators of crime? They're not looking at those. So, and people sort of get a bit annoyed when you go on about it. But actually, one of the common denominators you'll find, I've worked with at-risk youth for about 6.5 years, and I've done prisons where I've gone into prisons and met people there. And so the thing you'll find is that our prisons are populated generally with young men, and a lot of them have come from broken families. So when the family structure breaks down, those young people are more likely to get involved in crime. That's just the statistics say that. So then you've got to say, well, you can't stop families breaking down. Absolutely not. My parents split when I was young, so been there and done that. But we can try and help people keep their relationships together. So, you know, we're spending, like you're pointing out, all this sex education, but where's the relationship training on what makes a good relationship? Where's the training on, you know, guys and girls communicate differently, and how do you understand the other person? And there's a whole lot of little things like, you know, a woman might start whinging to you about something that's going on. She doesn't actually want you to fix it. She just wants you to hear and understand and be empathetic to her. As a male, we want to fix things. Oh, well, we'll sort that out. It's not what she wants. She doesn't want you to sort it out. She just wants you to hear. And it's communication and things like that. We're not taught those things. We
Yeah,
don't.
we're not.
And no, and sometimes by the time you find out, you've already destroyed the relationship. So I think flag the sex education in schools, because sex is one part of one relationship. Bring a relationship training. That's the core part. Diversify our education. So trade schools where young people that don't enjoy sitting in a classroom but are good hands-on learners, actually grab them early. Don't wait until they leave school at 16 or 17 when they've given up on education. Grab them at 12 and 13 when they're still involved in education, and keep them involved by letting them learn trades, whether it's hairdressing or baking or plumbing, electrical, draining, building, whatever. Actually keep them engaged. For us, it's about providing pathways away from crime as much as you can, fully understanding that some people will still get involved. That's human nature. Yeah. Have prisons for those people, and then if they end up going to prison, make them personally accountable.
Yeah.
So here's some things you need to do yourself, some goals you need to achieve yourself, individually tailored. So if they have fetal alcohol syndrome or learning disabilities, you're not going to ask them to get a PhD, but a learning outcome for them that they have to achieve before they move to the next stage. And then you want a progression where they're working outside of prison more and more and more, so that when they leave prison, it's not this jump into an unknown world.
Yeah.
It's just, oh, I've been working with these guys anyway. Now I just don't stay there at night. I can stay in my own home. So you're never going to stop it like that. Prisons are not going to stop it. We've disempowered authority when we passed the anti-smacking law. We see that now when no one's allowed to touch the kids and they do wrong. They can do the ram raids and they get dropped back at parents. They can mug, rob, they get dropped back at mum's home, dad's home, whatever. We've got to bring back consequence. We've got to bring back personal responsibility. But we've got to provide a pathway for them to help them get out if they get trapped.
If I asked that question to any of the major party leaders, that would get a very merely sort of worded
Sorry,
answer.
yeah, went on a bit, but yeah.
No, I like the detail, and I think people appreciate it, because you're not talking to them like they're idiots. You're saying, "Hey, this is the root of the problem. This is I think you talk with people at a level of their actual intelligence. People that just in the major parties, when they just say stuff like we've got a plan that'll do this, this, and that. It's like, okay, but how? How are you going to do that? I think people appreciate that,
So there was one program that was happening a while ago called community policing, where you look at a demographic area where you've got rising crime, and so you put more police on, have them on the street, and they'd visit all the shops, and they'd find the families that are causing the issues, and they'd visit the families, and they saw a massive reduction in crime. But because crime dropped, they stopped the program. Oh, we don't need it. It's not much crime. It's like, oh my goodness. And that unfortunately is part of New Zealand's short-sightedness. We sometimes don't look far enough ahead to look at what we need to do for long-term success. We sort of build more prisons. We can build them next 2 years and lock everyone up. Well, you're not forming a long-term solution to the issue. So community policing work, we need to get back to that. But what we're seeing with this rapid rise in crime now is it used to be contained within those set demographic areas, and now it's just blossoming out into everywhere. So it's a big issue. But you've got to start at the very beginning. What's your final outcome you want to achieve? Put some things in place here and work towards it.
So New Zealand's becoming like China in all the worst ways, but needs to be more like China in some of the better ways, like the 100-year plans rather than the 3-year plan.
Yeah.
I did hear one of the parties, and this is the last thing I'll say on crime. I think it was Winston Peters. He was saying that we should separate some of the prisons so that some are just for the gang members and others are just for the non-gang members, because often the gang members, hire and recruit and groom per se the non-gang members into it. And it's just...
There's a lot of talk about the gangs running the prisons. So, if someone's not associated with a gang, they probably shouldn't go to prison with gang members. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a smart move. You're looking at it. Again, it's one more part of the puzzle, isn't it? So if gang members are running prisons and we're seeing a lot of recruiting in prison, then separate them. I mean, it's just logical, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, you can't do that. It might be infringing on someone's rights.
Yeah, and I think that's the power of minor parties, because you can put some great policies out there and you can see how the major parties adopt them. And it's like, okay, thank you very much. And you didn't even have to run often. I've seen this happen in other elections.
It's exactly what happens. So in New Zealand at the moment, we've got Labor and National who call themselves the big parties, and they try and entrench that view in people's minds. So they get most of their electoral funding so that they're seen everywhere, so they can pretend they're the big parties. They won't debate anymore with minor parties because they got a bit of a downtrail years ago when a minor party grabbed 8 seats because they seemed a lot more common sense than the majors, so they won't even debate with them anymore. But what we're seeing in New Zealand is actually a real lack of confidence in the major parties, those two bigger parties. So the polls,
Yeah.
you'd think with Labor dropping down to low 20s, National
Yeah.
should be in the 50s, but they're not.
Yeah, they're not. So this is the latest Roy Morgan poll, which came out a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
And you're right. And I've noticed this in Australia as well. The major parties, their combined primary vote, it's getting lower than 2/3 now.
Yeah, so look, a while ago they started at 40% and each, so you're up to 80% total, but now you're down at what, 50 or 60% total, so they've dropped 20% support.
Yeah. And
So there's
who's picking it up? It's the Greens are taking it off Labor because they're outflanking them from the left. And then you've got parties like ACT, New Zealand First, and people like yourself that are actually picking up votes from the National Party.
But what happens is that part of the narrative of the major parties is, well, you vote for a minor party, it's a wasted vote. So last time we had people strategically voted apparently, and look what it's got us.
Yeah.
We're a disaster. Whereas
Yeah.
actually there's enough votes there to get 5 or 6 minor parties in, which actually would give us a democracy and a bit of diversity of thought on some of these issues.
Yeah.
But as long as you keep getting the same two groups, and National Labor could almost form a coalition. They're so similar now, it's not funny. And what tends to happen in New Zealand is Labor will make some radical reforms like that, National plateau, but they won't reverse it. They'll carry on the same way. And then Labor will get back in, and that's generally what has happened over the last 50 or 60 years. We haven't seen two different governments with different views, really. They have slightly different changes.
Yeah.
They're both heading in the same direction. If we really want to get the country back and get back to common sense, basic values, family values of a nation that actually you have the freedom to choose what you do with your business, on your farm, with your home, if you want to get back to that, you actually have to vote the minor parties, because the major parties are not going to do it. They're the ones that are in step with what's happening internationally, rather than what do we want as a nation.
I'd like to think that people are voting for people that will still pick up the phone even after the election and you've helped them get elected. I mean, you should ask anyone that's listening now in New Zealand and even in Australia with our elections, you should always ask that question. Is this person going to continue to pick up the phone after the election, or are they just picking up the phone now so that they can get my money or support or vote? Looking at where this election's going, it's looking clearer and clearer. The National Party is going to need a coalition arrangement. It's looking like ACT or New Zealand First or even yourself might have to provide them that few seats, dozen or so seats.
It'll be probably more than that they'll need.
Yeah.
It's actually a good thing. New Zealand doesn't have an upper house. They
Yeah.
don't actually have a formal constitution. So we have no way whatsoever of holding the government to account. So this government has been the worst. It's been getting progressively worse as far as passing legislation under urgency. But what under urgency effectively means is no consultation. We're just putting through what we want. So it's got nothing to do with democracy, as we're putting some legislation through that we want. Helen Clark might have, done 5 or 6 times, and then John Key probably, 20 times. But this government's done it 20 times in 1 year. And so when you get a government that's just so focused on ramming its ideology down the people, you understand you've lost your democracy.
Yeah.
And so getting other groups that can actually say to them, hold fire, no, you're not doing that. Where's your basis for it? Have you talked to the people? Long term, I'd love to see New Zealand get more of a direct democracy where you could actually put something out, whatever your policy is. So, Labor had the thing of taking GST off fruit and veggies. Incredibly stupid policy, because good policy should be necessary, it should be easy to explain, it should be easy to enforce and to achieve its desired result. That may be necessary, but it doesn't achieve any of the other three. It fails miserably. But you put that out and you say, these are the 10 reasons why, and these are the 10 reasons why not. And people have to read all of those and tick them before they can decide which way. But what you're actually doing is educating people. At the same time, you're educating them on the pros and cons of this particular legislation, and they're allowing people to give you real good feedback of exactly how they feel about it. I do not think the 120 people in Parliament can have more wisdom and understanding and knowledge than the rest of New Zealand. That's a fallacy. Some of them have got in there, and I haven't even heard their names since they got in. So that is a small group of people controlling the rest of New Zealand without listening to them. That's wrong. And if New Zealanders want that to change, they're the ones that have to step up and demand it. Because if they carry on the same path, they'll get what they've always got.
That's right. To the Aussies that are listening, the way the New Zealand Parliament's structured is so weird. It's so weird. So in Australia, in every state and territory, we have a lower house and we have an upper house. The lower house, it's in electorates. At a federal level, we have, electorates of roughly 100,000 people all over Australia. And then the upper house, we have 12 senators per state.
Yeah.
And you collect all the votes together in that state together. So you can get a lot of the people that want to vote for a minor party, pull them all together. And we also have preferential voting, so we can pool the resources, the votes together efficiently.
Yeah.
New Zealand, you don't have preferential voting.
No.
You have first past the post. And on top of that, you've got one chamber, you've got 72 electorates, 7 of which are Maori seats, and so they're whole electorates in themselves.
So the way our system works is you've either got to get 5% of the vote, which will give you 6 members of parliament, or you need to win a seat. Now, if you win an electorate seat, then the 5% threshold doesn't count. If you won a seat and got 2% of the vote, you get 2 MPs. So that's how the New Zealand system works. But problem is we do get people that vote for parties that don't get in, so they call that the wasted vote. And then there's 20% of people roughly that just don't bother voting anymore because they don't trust the system.
Yeah.
And they don't realise that they simply supported the party that got in, because they could have changed it. Because they chose not to get engaged, they didn't change it, and then the outcome they've got is their responsibility.
Not voting is consent. That's what I tell people. I don't have a lot of patience for people that are like that. The biggest threat to the voice referendum passing in Australia, it's actually people not showing up and voting. In Sydney, there are areas like Bankstown that have a 20% invalid vote rate.
Yeah.
Completely nuts. The whole of New South Wales, 16% invalid vote rate. That's 900,000 people.
So invalid vote for you, that someone they've marked it incorrectly, haven't put their name down, got something wrong on it?
There's a few different things. So an invalid vote rate doesn't include people that didn't register.
Right.
It includes people that didn't show up to the polling booth and vote.
Okay.
It includes people that didn't mark their ballot properly,
Yep.
that deliberately screwed up the ballot or just threw it out when they got there.
Yep.
And so, to have a 20% invalid vote rate in an ethnic area like Bankstown, a lot of that has to do with a lot of people not speaking the language, but a lot of it is an apathy. It's safe Labor heartland. A lot of them don't like what the Liberals are serving because they're trying to be Labor light.
Yeah.
And so they don't do their job. In New Zealand, I would definitely be campaigning in any seat where there's a high invalid vote rate because people are looking for change. It's a natural indicator.
We have local government here in New Zealand and central government, right? But central government dictates to local government. So local government could say, oh, we don't want to put fluoride in our water. Our people in our area don't want fluoride in our water. And central government say, you'll put fluoride in your water, we're going to fine you. That overarching control by very, very few people that somehow get the God syndrome when they get to Wellington and think that they have all wisdom and all power. That is the challenge for New Zealand. We've got to disseminate, take that power and authority they've got and give it back to the regions, make government, central government very, very small, just focused on its core roles, get rid of the bloated bureaucracy, allow local people to choose what they want in their area and get some freedom back. It's not going to be easy because those at the top don't want to give up their gourmet sandwiches.
Not at all, and not even going to admit their faults. Chris Hipkins, your Prime Minister after Jacinta Ardern resigned, he made the point the other day that, no one was forced into taking the vaccine, and he doubled down on these mandates, and he said, no one was forced, there weren't any, everyone had a choice, and he defended his position and doubled down on radio yesterday morning, and this is what he said.
Quickly, the comments you made yesterday on the vaccine and the mandate, do you regret that?
Sorry, which comments are you talking about?
Sorry, my apologies. On Sunday, you made the comment about the vaccine mandate. Ultimately, it was not mandated. Vaccines were not mandated. You stand by that? There was no compulsory vaccination.
That is not the word that I used. I said nobody was forced to be vaccinated.
There was no compulsory vaccination. People made their own choices, quote unquote.
That is correct, Mike. There were some people needed to be vaccinated to do some jobs, but no one was made to be vaccinated.
So you would stand, all I'm asking for the record, you would stand by it. So the person, for example, who made the choice not to get vaccinated, lost their business and laid people off, that's on them, not you.
Well, they made a choice.
Appreciate your time very much. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins.
No, you're a statesman, so I'll say it. The man's a psychopath. The idea that he's getting all legal jargon on us and not using the official terms, man, and he was the health minister, right?
He brought in so much of it. You know what the most obnoxious thing about that? These lives, he destroyed people's lives by the rules he brought in. He totally destroyed their lives. He took people that have been serving our community for 20 or 30 years as nurses, as doctors, as paramedics, and he got them dismissed and they lost their livelihood, they lost their profession, they lost their credibility, some lost their houses. He did that. And for him to stand there and do that, that is the most offensive. He's disgusting. He's repulsive to me. Put it in this way, is it legal to pay tax in New Zealand? Do you have to pay tax?
I don't know.
Well, we do. You say, yeah, it's compulsory to pay tax. Why? Well, if you don't, you're going to go to jail. That's exactly the same thing he brought in. You must get vaccinated or you will lose your job. You can't go out. Our Prime Minister said we're going to have two-tier society. She was asked, well, you're going to have two different parts. That's exactly how it is. There's segregation. It's so disgusting what they did to their own people. And so the protest last year, they turned the police on their own people. I was there for 2.5 weeks. The lies coming out of the media and the government saying, oh, they're violent and horrible people, simply not true. Those people stood there, even in the rain, in a storm, when the government's turned the sprinklers on them, and they danced the margarita to the loud music blaring out of them from Parliament buildings. And the police didn't come down and say, hey, guys, well, what's going on? The police never came and set up a booth and said, hey, well, what are your stories? What is the harm the government's caused you? None of that. No discussion, no debate. The government would not even engage in discussion over it. They simply set the police on them. That's setting the police on your own people and not even talking to them. China's been over teaching our police how to manage groups. I mean, like I said, I got involved in politics, I don't know, a decade or so ago because I saw our democracy being stolen from us. And it is so much worse now than it was then. And it's almost at the stage, well, I've tried, what do you do? You know, like people don't want to know. They're so blind, and yet you see the harm that these idiots. I shouldn't say that. No, they are. These people, they're either idiots or they're evil. That's the only two options I've got. They're idiots or they're evil, because you cannot do that to people. Good, hardworking, tax-paying New Zealanders that have served their community, you cannot do that to them and then with a straight face saying, oh, that was their choice, they had a choice. Yeah, it's just foul. They're foul. They have no right to be there. I said it last year in Parliament. They have no right to be there. Those politicians in the House, they're past their use-by date.
Yeah.
They don't represent the people. They represent vested interests. They're controlled. They will not speak up for the people. They won't even speak to the people. They just abuse them, demonise them, marginalise them and kick them into touch. That's not good government. New Zealand has not got a good government. It has not got a good government structure. It has not got a good electoral process. And that is why New Zealanders at the moment suffering a huge cost of living crisis. We're losing our assets. The future's not looking good. Crime's going through the roof. Our education is plummeting and we're struggling with our healthcare. It's because we don't have good government.
Well, from an outsider's perspective, that would explain the decreasing Labor vote, National vote, the increasing invalid vote. People are getting disillusioned and they're moving, like the Uber drivers I mentioned.
Yep.
Well, can I ask you a frank question? You're putting you've already put your name on the line, but you're doing it again by running and putting yourself out there. You're putting your family out there. You're putting your livelihood out there. Why are you doing it? I mean, what's wrong with you? Do you have no sense of self-preservation?
No, it's just the fear of having to move to Aussie.
You wouldn't want that. God forbid. It's a terrible country.
Yeah. I love this country. I really do. I love the people here. I mean, this is, I guess that's the hard thing about when you bring segregation and Māori saying this is our land. Well, this is my land. I have nowhere else to go. This is my country. I've never lived anywhere else. I've raised my family here, my grandchildren here. I've lived all over, not in every place, but I've lived in Invercargill and I've lived in the far north and a lot of places in between. It's a beautiful nation that should be at the top of the world in so many things. We have got great teachers, but our education standard's falling. We've got fantastic nurses, but we're struggling with our health department. We've got some of the world's best farmers, but a lot of them want to quit because they've had a guts full. We've got incredibly hard-working small business people that actually just want to throw the towel in because it doesn't matter how big they get, they still struggle. And so all of that is simply the environment that we're creating in New Zealand with legislation that can change really quickly. And so it's the government's role to provide an environment where people can flourish. This government wants to control everything, and that's different. That suppresses people and holds them back. So I want to present a clear vision for the people in New Zealand. You don't have to be controlled. You don't have to be manipulated. You don't have to be spending so much money maintaining a massive bureaucracy that controls you. You can actually have a free, fair and flourishing New Zealand, but it requires change and it requires courage. So I get 2 votes, one in my electorate, one for my party, just like everyone else in New Zealand. I'm simply putting my name out there and I'm saying, if you get that idea, if you grab that vision, then vote for someone that you think has got a vision for a better New Zealand. Because if you simply vote because of the colour your parents voted for, you're going to get the result we've got now, which isn't working.
Right.
You know, Wendy Gillespie, who's standing for us in the Bay of Plenty, is absolute gold. She's a really smart woman, really experienced, and got some great ideas how we change things. That's the sort of people we need in Parliament. She's not an ideologue. She's been around the block. She's done the hard graft. She's worked in a whole lot of areas. She's got some insight and understanding. That's who we need in Parliament to actually allow the people in New Zealand to flourish.
Absolutely. Now, look, do you see yourself sticking around if it doesn't go as planned this election and we get a bit of the same old sort of government?
Can't leave. It's my family. It's my home. It's where I live. It's my nation. I'll stand here and, you know, you got to face the music and do what we can. I don't like the way it's going. I guess I'm fearful of what my grandchildren are going to have to put up with if I don't do it. But at least, you know, maybe one day I'm in an old folks' home or something, they come around to visit me, at least I'll be able to look them in the eye and say, I did my best. I tried. But I have no more right to force my vision on the people of New Zealand than I believe the government has a right to force their ideology on New Zealand. I should be able to present it, and it's up to the voters to choose whether they like it or they would rather stay with the status quo.
All right. Leighton Baker, there's no golden parachute. You're not going anywhere. There's no retreat. More power to your arm, and I want to thank you for being very generous with your time in informing us on the voice in New Zealand. But yeah, I wish you the best of luck in this election. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ian. Lovely to meet you, Joel.
Pleasure.